I don't usually take more than a cursory interest in the booker, but when people's predictions videos started coming out, I had read a couple of the books and was interested in loads more. So while July Carrie was all, I'm going to mood read, I'm going to work through all of my reading commitments so that I can just mood read, August Carrie was like, oh, look over there, something shiny and new, the booker long list. I know, wouldn't it be fun to read the whole thing? I have never read a whole long list, so what on earth has inspired me to do this now with a prize that I don't usually read widely from? I have no idea. It could be the heat, it could be the perimenopause, who knows? Alas, here we are. So I thought I would share some brief thoughts about what I've read so far and what my experience has been like as a whole. I'm going to start with the books that I was least impressed by and work my way up to favourites. So first up we have The Shadow of the Object by Chloe Aridjis. This was all mood, no plot. A woman is bitten by a dog, and then while she's in hospital, she is befriended by an old lady a cantankerous old lady who has like a collection of puppets and like shadow puppets and toys that play with light, like light illusion type toys. I was on board with the hospital section, but it lost me after that, unfortunately. I really struggled to even discern like what the author was trying to achieve, and so it made it really hard for me to say whether or not it was successful because I didn't know what it was trying to do or say. I think it was probably speaking to like perception, but that's a little on the nose of me given that it's about kind of like shadow puppets. Like, of course it's about illusion and how things are perceived. I think it was speaking to like the value and meaning that we put on physical objects perhaps, and how objects can hold different meanings to different people and at different times, but essentially this one wasn't for me. I listened to Helen of Nowhere by Makenna Goodman. This is about a man whose career and marriage are unravelling, and he goes to look at a property that's up for sale and is shown around it by a realtor who basically spends their time waxing lyrical about the previous owner. They have been moved to a care home, and whilst there, the man imagines a pretty frank conversation with the previous owner about his life and basically the meaning of it all. I really like books that use like a liminal space to explore ideas. So here it was the property that's neither resided in by the previous owner nor is it kind of like owned by anybody else. I think it's a really interesting narrative device. It touches on some ideas that have the potential to be interesting: people's relationship to place, relocation as a means of escape, and like an admiration for nature. But overall I found this to be a bit of a nothing burger. It's described quite widely as philosophical, and I would agree with that in as much as it asks philosophical questions, but I don't think it made any attempt to speculate to an answer, and I think that's probably where it fell down. It was a bit kind of like meh. The Vivissectors by Missouri Williams was an interesting one. I really did not enjoy reading this book, but also when I finished it, I think it was kind of brilliant. Booker books need to stand up to a reread, and ideally they need to be books that could have the potential to be future classics. And although I'm not going to be rushing back to reread this one, I think it could probably be studied for decades and people would still find new things to say about it. My notes for this one were long and slightly unhinged. And that tells me there's an awful lot to unpack. So a recent graduate, Agatha, is working for a really lazy professor, and she's doing all of her like marking, her research, her reading and stuff. When the professor's favourite student falls out with a lecturer and makes a complaint, his frustration affects his relationship with the professor that Agatha's working for, and so Agatha is sent off to pose as a student and befriend him so that the professor can kind of like stay in the loop and spy on him basically. It's set at a university, and I work at a university, and I really enjoyed how Missouri Williams captured some of the really niche micro-politics of a university and the slightly weird culture of academics. I thought that was done really well. Again, we're in this kind of like slightly liminal space. Universities are both kind of steeped in tradition and we've always done it this way kind of culture, but they also need to be ever changing. The very nature of the fact that students are coming and going every 3 to 5 years makes it a really transient space. And obviously universities have to be ever changing. They have to stay relevant to the youth that they're meant to be appealing to. So you've got this kind of like weird balance of like odd traditions that people will live and die by, and also like this kind of nature of it always kind of evolving and changing and being this kind of ever moving space. So yeah, we're back to that kind of like liminal space of a setting. I think it provides a really good backdrop to this story. I found this quite dense to get through, and I had way too many questions at the end for me to consider it a favourite. What the hell did the gardeners represent? Was this about conflict? What was it saying about climate change and human geography versus physical geography? And what the fuck was the whale meant to symbolise? Like, I had so many questions. So as I said at the top, I really didn't enjoy my reading of this book, but I stand by my feeling that it is also brilliant. So now onto the books that I have enjoyed. The Renovation by Kenan Ohran was very much my kind of book. Speculative, allegorical, humorous, and slightly traumatic. You don't want to know too much going into this. A woman is getting her bathroom renovated, and when the work people leave, she goes in to have a look at what they've done, and it turns out they have turned it into a Turkish prison cell. The woman lives with her emotionally and often physically absent husband and her father, father-in-law, and he has escalating dementia, and she is left kind of doing a lot of the domestic labour, and they've all moved from Turkey to Italy. Unlike with The Shadow of the Object, I really got what the author was trying to do. I think she did a really great job of exploring this concept of exile in all its forms. So physical exile, emotional exile, mental exile, thinking about her father's dementia, political exile, social exile, like all of it is explored, and not dry, and really smart and engaging way. The prison room represented different things at different times depending on what was going on in the story. I thought that worked really well, and I really appreciated in particular how the author shone a light on the impact of political polarisation on women in particular. This was a really good example of great speculative fiction that uses like a slightly bonkers plot device to discuss and explore really complex themes. Absolutely loved it. I also read John of John by Douglas Stuart. I managed to get hold of this copy from my library in work, and because I work at a university over the summer, they have really long return dates, so that was a very happy moment. Cal's called home to his father's croft on a really remote Scottish island in the Highlands because his grandmother's not very well. He's just finished art college and has a bunch of student debt and no job, so off he goes home. Cal is a gay man, and he's not out to his father and most of his community, and the book's really about their family dynamic. I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to get into spoilers. That's kind of all you need to know going in. I find this really slow to start with. Douglas Stuart has a really gentle and really easy reading writing style, and there was quite a lot of time spent setting the scene. But there comes a point where you as a reader learn something that the characters don't know, and from there on I was absolutely invested. So Douglas Stuart does this really interesting thing where sometimes he drops you right into the action of a scene at the very start of a chapter, so you couldn't even predict what was coming and like shout at the book like, no, don't do that, what are you thinking, stop, go back, don't say that thing, or whatever it might be. They're already there and doing whatever it is that they should or shouldn't be doing, and so at that point you're just like, well, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. But it was just a really smart way to kind of like move the story on and kind of make some tweaks to the pacing, which I really appreciated. At one point I got total plot anxiety, like, could everybody please, all the characters, just stop what you're doing, stop making any decisions that jeopardize your future happiness, just everybody stay where you are. All of the characters are really flawed, some much more than others, but ultimately you really want the best for all of them. By the time I got to the last quarter of this book, I was desperate to finish it. I was literally like, put the audiobook in and was listening to that while I was making tea. When I was watching TV with my partner in the evening, he got up to go and do something else, and I put my audiobook back in just for a couple of minutes, and then kind of it got to a certain time and I was like, oh gosh, so tired. I think I need an early night to go and do a bit more reading, and then I got up early the next day as well to finish it. So yeah, I raced through the last quarter of this. I thought it was really excellent. I've seen some discourse about the ending from reviewers and about whether people feel that it's ultimately tragic or hopeful. I think I probably land on the hopeful end. Yeah, but I think I can see how that's open to interpretation. But loved this. This was 5 stars from me. Thought it was excellent. And lastly, my current read is The Things We Never Say by Elizabeth Strout. It's about a history teacher called Artie Dam. It's a real character study of his life, and it's both a commentary on a balm on the current socio-political landscape in our age of division, particularly in the US. Artie is just a really delightful character to spend time with, and so this book is an absolute pleasure. The thing that's really impressed me about this is how Elizabeth Strout is capturing so much emotion on the page. I know that her writing leaves lots of people cold, but I've really genuinely been in awe about how she's managed to capture like the whole spectrum of human emotion, and in the most like human way. She's holding all of it in tension, like joy and despair and hope and fear and shame and pride, like all of it is held in perfect tension. I was thinking about it this morning and thinking how this book could have been written differently, like without changing the content, like without changing the story or the plot or what, you know, what happens in the book. You know what story and plot is. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm explaining that. Without changing what happens, this could be a real misery fest, or it could have been written in a really twee way. It could have gone in either direction. But actually what she's done is create this perfect balance. And so that's what I mean by having all of those human emotions like held perfectly in tension. Yeah, I think it's really quite special. I'm reading it really slowly and really savouring my time with it. And not to overhype this, but I think this might replace my favourite book of the year so far. So those are the books that I've read or am reading. Overall themes that I've noticed across these books, academia certainly, and you can really tell that this panel of judges has a value of puts a great value on education. You know, there's a couple of university settings, there's lots of characters that are professors or teachers, so yeah, you can really see that there's a love of education there. The other theme that I picked out is this kind of like notion of man versus nature, in like some explicit and less explicit ways. So that's quite explicit in like the Vivissectors, for example. In Helen of Nowhere, the character's kind of in awe of nature and looking at like the healing restorative powers of being in nature. In John of John, the location of that family is quite pertinent, and I think if you just lifted up that family and put them in a city, would things be different for them all? I think probably yes. Yes, and Artie is a sailor, and there's lots about him interacting with the sea, and so yeah, I think that's an interesting theme that I've noticed across all of the books that I've read so far. I'm in two minds about keeping going. I feel a little bit burned out from reading so many thinky books in such a short space of time, but also really inspired. I can totally see the value of reading a long list as a collection. If I was going to do this again, I would probably be a bit more strategic about what I read back to back. Cole, whose video I will link below, has made a really good video where he planned what he was going to read in what order, taking into consideration release dates and the length of the books, but also the themes, so that he was pairing books that he thought might be a bit on the heavier side with something that looked to be a bit lighter. And that's you can tell it's not his first rodeo. It's not his first time reading this book along list. That's something I would definitely consider doing if I was to do this again. So I plan to get to Black Bag because that was already on my wish list, and I have a copy of The End of Everything, so I will definitely read that. And so of the remaining books, I'm gonna see how I get on. We'll see. So this might be a part one, this might be Kerry never talks about the book again, who knows. But yeah, I'd love to know if you've been reading from the book along list, any highlights that you've got, if there's any books that I've not read that you think I should definitely get to. Let me know what you think of the books that I've talked about today. And that's it from me. So I hope that you're looking after yourself, and I will see you again in another video.